It started with a phone call that I never expected to receive. I was standing in my driveway on a quiet Saturday morning when I heard sirens coming down the street. Two police cruisers stopped directly in front of my house. I stepped outside and saw an officer get out of the first vehicle. "Are you the property owner?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. Before he could say anything else, the HOA president came storming out from across the street. Her name was Karen, and for months she had acted like she personally controlled every house, driveway, and piece of land in the neighborhood. She pointed directly at me. "That's him. Arrest him." I honestly thought she was joking. The officer looked at her, then looked back at me. "Ma'am, what exactly did he do?" "He's trespassing," Karen shouted. "He refuses to follow HOA rules. He blocked our access road, and he's interfering with neighborhood property." I could see the officer becoming confused. He asked Karen, "Whose property is this?" Karen immediately answered, "The HOA's." Then she smiled like she had just won the argument. But I reached into my folder and pulled out a copy of the property documents. "Officer, before you do anything, you should probably look at this." He took the papers. He read the first page. Then the second. His expression changed. He looked at Karen, then back at me. "Sir, is this document current?" "Yes." He looked at the other officer. Then he quietly said something that made Karen's smile disappear. "Ma'am, I think you have this completely backwards." Karen stepped forward. "What are you talking about?" The officer held up the document. "This property is privately owned." Karen crossed her arms. "Of course it is. By the HOA." The officer shook his head. "No, by him." She stared at him. "What?" The officer looked at me again. "According to these records, he owns the land underneath this entire section of the neighborhood." Karen suddenly stopped talking. I explained that years earlier, my family had purchased a larger parcel before the neighborhood was developed. The homes were built later. The HOA had been created to manage the community. But the underlying land, roads, easements, and certain common areas remained governed by the original property documents. Karen apparently had never bothered to read them. Instead, she had spent months sending me violation notices. She demanded that I remove equipment from my property. She ordered me to stop using a private access road. She even threatened to have my driveway closed. And now she had called 911 expecting the police to arrest me. The officer looked through the documents one more time. Then he said the sentence Karen would never forget. "Ma'am, he owns the neighborhood." Silence. Even the second officer looked surprised. Karen's face turned bright red. "That can't be right." The officer calmly explained that an HOA can enforce its recorded rules, but that did not automatically give it ownership of land it didn't legally own. Karen insisted the documents must be wrong. So I pulled out another folder. Inside were certified property records, surveys, easement maps, and years of recorded documents. The officer examined them carefully. Everything matched. Then Karen tried a different argument. "But he doesn't live by the HOA rules." I smiled. "Actually, I do. What I don't do is follow rules that don't apply to property I own outside the association's authority." The officer nodded. Karen looked furious. She had called the police expecting them to remove me. Instead, they were standing there explaining the limits of her authority. Then the officer asked her one final question. "Did you personally verify these property records before calling 911? Karen didn't answer. He continued, "Because this wasn't a criminal emergency." That was when her entire plan collapsed. The officers told everyone to remain calm and explained that property disputes should be handled through the proper civil process. Then they left. Karen stood in the street, watching the police cars disappear. For months, she had acted like she owned everyone. But that morning, she discovered something very different. She wasn't the person with the most authority. She wasn't even the person who understood the property records. She had simply assumed that the HOA owned everything because she was the HOA president. And one phone call to 911 exposed the truth. Later that afternoon, I received an email from the HOA board. They wanted to meet. This time I agreed, but I brought every document with me. The meeting lasted less than 30 minutes. By the end of it, The board had acknowledged that several of Karen's previous demands had been based on incorrect assumptions about property ownership. The following week, the HOA sent a written clarification to the neighborhood. Karen never apologized, but she stopped sending me threats. And she stopped telling people that she owned the neighborhood, because now everyone knew the truth. The most satisfying part wasn't seeing Karen embarrassed. It was watching the entire neighborhood realize that confidence isn't the same thing as authority. Documents matter. Property records matter. And sometimes, the person everyone assumes has no power is actually the person holding the deed. If you enjoyed this HOA story, make sure to subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.